Welcome to Because the Beatles, the podcast about the Beatles, everything about the Beatles 24/8. I'm Allison.
And I'm Erica. And before we start, be sure to subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, or stream us on Spotify. And if you're enjoying BC the Beatles, and of course you are,
Why would you not?
of course, feel free to leave us a preferably 5-star review so other Beatlemaniacs can find us.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll be posting videos, photos, and more from this episode and beyond. You can also email us at bcthebeatles@gmail.com. Hello, Erica. I don't know why I'm doing this. I guess I'm just really excited.
Because it's a Paul day!
It's your favorite kind of day.
It's the best day of the year, decade, last 2 years, I guess.
Well, definitely this dumpster fire of a year, it is the best day.
Yes, it is the best day of 2020. Today, December 18th, is the day that McCartney III is out. So, of course, we're doing a special dedicated to a track-by-track analysis of the album.
Hell yeah. And I gotta say, I'm getting a little bit nostalgic because if you remember, Erica, way back in 2018, which seems like a million years ago now, we were sort of dragging our feet on starting the podcast. And lo and behold, Paul's like, oh, guess what? I'm coming out with Egypt Station. So you better get on that. We did a special for Egypt Station. It wasn't our first episode. He sort of forced us to make one before that, but we did it about Paul and about his album making and his marketing tactics. We talked about Percy Thrillington. So yeah, this is a little throwback to that. I can't believe that was like 2 years ago now.
I know. Where does the time go?
I know, it's insane. Yeah, if you want to hear that, that is our episode 1. And then I think this is special, but I think it's our second episode.
I think it's our third. We had Yellow Submarine in between.
Oh, wow. We were very productive then.
We were.
I need to revisit our archive. But of course, we're talking about McCartney III today.
Speaking of being super productive in quarantine while the rest of us are eating too much and making sourdough.
Yeah, right? Paul, come on. Why do you have to show us up like this?
Seriously.
Absolutely ridiculous.
The lead up to this was pretty quick, which was kind of fun. It was a big surprise out of kind of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, we had a couple of hints over the summer. This is a guess on my part. I think that he probably surprised Capitol with this as well. I don't think that they really expected a new McCartney album. So it probably was a bit of a fire drill. And God bless them, they pulled it off. They did have to delay the release by a week, but that's a miracle. And hats off to you guys over at Capitol. It was originally supposed to come out December 11th, but of course coming out today, the 18th. And I mean, really, the reason, come on, they went balls to the walls with the color variants partners, the rollout with the marketing, which we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yes.
I mean, it was all very cool, and there was definitely a lot to chew on, shall we say, when the announcement was made.
The main album is 11 songs, and I think there are more color editions than there are songs on McCartney III at this point.
I think you might be right, especially since they've added the packs of the vinyl and the ornament and the mask and what, a t-shirt? It's the kitchen sink? I'm not even sure, really. It's just, there's a lot there.
Oh, it's so much. I don't know. These things give me decision paralysis. I never know what to do.
Yeah, I haven't ordered anything because I couldn't decide, and then they were all gone.
Oh, you missed the Pretty Violet one?
I did. Well, now I know. When I was looking at all the different variants when we were, preparing this episode, I was like, damn it, I really wish I would have gotten the pink version because favorite color. But, I eventually, I'll get something, I'm sure. But I just couldn't decide. And yeah, I almost got the Third Man. We'll talk about it in a minute, but almost ordered a Third Man. And then I was like, no. And then it was gone. So, story of my life, bro.
Boo.
Yeah. So going back to the summer, and this is when we started to see some hints drop. And I remember being on our Twitter and I saw somebody said, oh guys, McCartney3.com's reserved. And we were all abuzz about it. Except when you went there, it returned a 303 error instead of a 404 error. Cheeky.
And for those non-nerds in the audience, a 404 error is what you get when it's a broken link that goes to nowhere. But a 303 error is more of a redirect. So that means there is something behind the error that we can't get to.
Oh, I didn't know. So I know what a 404 is because I'm a huge freaking nerd. But I didn't know there was such thing as an actual 303 error.
It's a redirect status response code.
Oh, yeah. I just thought it was a cheeky thing, but they may have set it up on the back end then.
Probably just it wasn't ready yet. And somebody found that And I never would have noticed if somebody else hadn't pointed it out, 303, I would have assumed it was like a
Yeah.
404 and led to nowhere, but nope.
Interesting. Well, we all learned something today about back-end programming, which
Yes,
really is the other theme of our podcast.
of course.
It's full stack background database, etc. Yeah, anyway, so also over the summer, we had a GQ article come out with Paul. He alluded to making new music in lockdown, aka in rockdown, which we'll talk about in a second. And it made total sense, I think, to those of us who read it that he might be preparing a new record because it's kind of like how he made McCartney and McCartney II, which were largely solo efforts. And he was pretty isolated, and especially McCartney II was really experimental. So when Paul gets in the studio, come on, there's something weird going to come out
Oh,
more
for
times
sure.
than not. Like when he's by himself, yeah, for an extended period of time.
And an interesting throwback to McCartney is that he was on self-imposed isolation then. He was making it right when the Beatles were breaking up, when he went to the farm with Linda. It was around the time that he was really depressed and drinking a lot and just in self-isolation. And so there is that bookend feeling to McCartney 3 where he made something out of this imposed quarantine that we're all in.
Yeah, and as we'll talk about when we go through the tracks, Paul actually realized that. It occurred to him that he made McCartney during what he called the horror of the Beatles breakup, and now he made McCartney 3 during the horror of the COVID pandemic. It wasn't lost on him, the profundity of that.
Damn it, Paul, you always got to see the good in everything. So damn optimistic.
Oh, yeah, and we'll talk about that in a minute, which one of the tracks, which is one of my favorites, but it's all about that pretty much. So before the album's announcement, we began seeing these die, what is it?
I think it's a die. It's a single die with the 3 dots showing.
Yes, exactly, the die. So it began appearing pretty much everywhere. It was on his Twitter bio, Instagram, Spotify added it over animations to songs from the McCartney and McCartney 2 album. It was like a hand actually rolling it, landing on a 3. And then Paul's Twitter started posting photos featuring 3 things. And I didn't even realize this. I had to wiki it today, but his Twitter posted them at 33 past the hour every
Oh my
time.
god.
And I
Oh my
would have
god.
never noticed. Maybe I'm not observant. I don't know.
That's so subtle.
So yeah. So finally, they confirmed what we all believed to be true anyway. And McCartney 3 was formally announced on October 21st, which was a great day. And then all hell broke loose. Yeah.
Just in the vinyls alone, how many colors do we have? We have yellow, red, the Coke bottle green vinyl, regular green, orange, pink, blue, white, yellow, well, another yellow, okay, that doesn't count, violet, and then the standard black. So, yeah, we're at 11.
Hey, that makes sense. 11 tracks.
Exactly, not to mention it's on CD and streaming, so you can get
Yes.
it anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah, and if you manage to snag the yellow with black dots from Third Man, there's only 333 released of those. Like, first of all, congrats. And I'm jealous because that would be the cool one, I think, to have the coolest. Did you order one?
I'm getting a blue one for my birthday, one of the Australian ones.
Ooh, nice. So instead of releasing a single, which he's done for Egypt Station, I mean, not technically, but you traditionally do it. He decided to roll out the track listing via 12 murals, hashtag 12 Days of Paul, which started December 12th. It started before that, though. I think the first mural went up December 6th or so. So we talked about it a little bit on our last episode.
Yeah, I think there are already 3 available by then.
Yeah, because ours went up here in LA, and I posted the photos on our Instagram. You can go check it out, or our Facebook, Twitter, which is the mural on the Capitol building, which is Find My Way. But now they're all up. So just to go through them really quick. The first one was in London, which is the first track of the album, Long Tailed Winter Bird. 2, Los Angeles, Find My Way. 3, Mexico City, Pretty Boys. 4, Sydney, Australia, Women and Wives. 5 is Toronto, Lavatory Lil. 6, Berlin, Deep Deep Feeling. 7, New York City, Slidin'. 8, Tokyo, A Kiss of Venus. 9, Chicago, Seize the Day. 10, Paris, Deep Down. 11, Rio, Winterbird / When Winter Comes. And then, interestingly, 12, Liverpool, Wonderful Christmas Time.
Why not? And you were happy with your city's choice of song. I don't know how I feel about mine, but whatever. We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I mean, I was super happy because that's probably, I mean, that was one of the ones that leaked ahead of time, and I was just super excited to hear it or see it, on the set of Capitol. So he didn't release a single, but he did do something that I thought was kind of like, it was very frustrating for me and for a lot of people.
Mhm.
If you subscribe to his newsletter or follow him on Spotify, he released these little EPs on Spotify, and they had themes like love, home, holidays, and family. I remember when Home came out, I think it was the first one, and we all were like, oh my God, like he's going to drop a track from McCartney III. No, it's just a compilation of tracks that sort of follow that theme of home and the other themes that are the title of the EPs. Interestingly, these themes, aside from like holiday, probably were omnipresent on the McCartney album. I don't know if he meant to do that. I was reading that somewhere that it sort of happened that way, but it was interesting that it sort of fell that way.
He definitely meant it. Every little bit of micro marketing that he does, I feel, is intentional.
That's true. That's true. Shout out to Paul. Shout out to his team. I mean, they kill it every time. They really do.
Seriously, and this time they had to find a way to make all of these grand marketing gestures virtual. Think about how they did it. They put these big banners on walls in cities across the world where people don't have to get together to see them. And they can see them when they're out and socially distanced. And then they go back to their homes and they can make a creative project, just like Paul did with McCartney III. I mean, the whole thing is just like it's a masterclass on marketing. It's so good.
And one thing that we forgot to mention is that each of the tracks, although the actual track by Paul wasn't released, people have been covering the songs based on the sheet music, and they've been on the internet. Paul's been sharing them on his socials. It's been a really unique way to sort of see the rollout. And I'm really interested to hear what people think of the tracks after they, since they've heard the covers first, then they'll hear the actual tracks. I always think of, and I didn't look this up ahead of time, so I don't know specifics. But one of my favorite examples of this sort of surprise marketing, kind of like this, was when I think it was Donny Osmond, I think in the 80s, released a single, but by then he was pretty passe.
Mhm.
So they mailed the single with blank label out to stations, and they started playing it on the radio, and people were going crazy. They're like, who is this? Like, this is a great song. And I can't remember the song, but it's kind of like that where it's I was thinking about that as I was listening to the album, like, gosh, what if like one of these tracks got mailed to a radio station, like one of these covers or something, and it sort of just got airplay, and then it's revealed to be a Paul McCartney song from McCartney 3. Like, that would be so brilliant.
That would be amazing if we found, like, the next Billie Eilish out of something like this.
Oh, that would be so cool. That would be
Yeah.
amazing. And I like that it's not big names doing it. Of course, that would be cool, but I love that it's like local artists in a lot of cases and just at their computers doing it. They're really spotlighting these smaller up and coming artists. It's so cool.
Yeah, I love it.
So, Erica, shall we get into the album? Let's get to the nitty gritty here.
We have not discussed this album prior to this podcast episode.
No,
So, these are our
we have
thoughts
not.
for the first time. We have no notes in front of us about the other's opinion, we have nothing.
We didn't even discuss it when we like discovered the leak of Find My Way.
No.
No, nothing. So yeah, pretty exciting to discuss this.
Yes.
Just a couple of fast facts about this album. It is Paul's 18th studio album, and you guys probably all know this, but the instruments and vocals are all by Paul. It was produced and composed by Paul. It was recorded in Rockdown, at Paul's studio in Sussex, which is called Hog Hill Mill. The label description for the album is McCartney III is a stripped back, self produced solo work marking the opening of a new decade in the tradition of Paul's 1970 debut solo album and 1980's second one Paul band effort, McCartney II. I actually didn't even realize the whole decade thing before I read the description.
That's so Paul to be talking about ushering in a new decade rather than, an end cap to the horrific dumpster fire, which was 2020, so that's nice.
Yes, that is nice. Thank you,
Mhm.
Paul. And like we said, it was made in Rockdown, which is such a Paul thing to say
I
instead of
love it.
lockdown. It's such a dad, like, he was like, guys, listen, it was made in Rockdown. And he just thought
Yeah.
he was a genius.
And his kids were embarrassed because that's what happens when you tell dad jokes like that.
Exactly, exactly. And also, this album is dedicated, it says in the booklet of the CD, to Eddie Klein. He died in July. I couldn't find out a cause. I'm not sure if it was COVID, so can't say. He was a former engineer at Abbey Road, which is where he met Paul. And then he went to work for Paul in the 80s and was still working with him until recently. And Paul also credits him with putting together his recording studio. Like basically, Eddie knew every knob, every switch, everything. So it kind of makes sense that he would dedicate this album to his friend Eddie.
Oh,
And yeah,
that's so
that's very
nice.
lovely. Yeah. So, all right, here we go.
All right.
Do you want to start us off with the track listing?
Track number 1, Long-Tailed Winter Bird. This was an interesting start to the album. It's a mostly instrumental track. The lyrics are almost nonsense, but it really sets the tone. It's like a layered acoustic track that feels like it's preparing us for what we're going to get. You know, this homemade, kind of simple album, but in a good way. So to me, much more like McCartney than McCartney II. Not only does it let us in on the methodology, but for those who are expecting some epic, long and winding road, maybe I'm amazed. It sets expectations that this is at home. This is kind of an experiment. He said about it, each day I'd start recording with the instrument I wrote the song on and then gradually layer it all up. It was a lot of fun. It was about making music for yourself rather than making music that has to do a job. So I just did stuff I fancied doing. I had no idea this would end up as an album. I feel like that quote absolutely describes what this song is. It's kind of a
Hmm.
jam session, sort of reminds me of some of the looser tracks on Electric Arguments for the Firemen. It also kind of reminded me of the overlapping animal sounds on Good Morning, Good Morning. The way you just
Mm,
kind of like, how much bigger can you get? How much weirder can you get with the instrumentation? It's cool.
interesting. Yeah,
What you think?
I like that comparison to Good Morning, Good Morning. I like this track. I think you're right. It does sort of set expectations. I really like the guitar arpeggio and the layering of it in the beginning. It's very Paul to do that. It sort of reminded me of Heather from Driving Rain. Just those
Oh,
arpeggios where he falls in love with an arpeggio and just does it over
mhm.
and over and over. But I liked the dissonance of it. I liked that it wasn't an expected sort of, it set like sort of a minor key kind of tone there as the guitar overlaps. I also like that it sort of alludes to lockdown. It's sort of the first hint, and there's a lot of them here, but the first hint that this was made during COVID, which I think he expresses something that we all feel, which are the lyrics, do you feel me? Do you miss me? Do you trust me? Like this
Mm.
sort of like questioning of relationships, and nobody really knows what's going on right now or with
Yeah.
other people. So I liked that. I just felt like it sort of spoke to the COVID times, but I think it was beautiful. I think it's very Paul.
That kind of wailing main guitar melody that he kind of starts with, and then it starts the last track on the song. Like, that's
Hmm.
really striking. And even do you see me is a classic McCartney earworm. So there's
Yes.
little bits in this that really, really stand out among the whole jam session kind of feel.
Yes, yes. I'm going to save my overarching opinions of the album till the very end, but I think that is something we can probably say about McCartney 3 in general is like the jam vibe of it is definitely here. And so this kicks off what to expect with the other 10 tracks. And also, yeah, I think listening to this as big McCartney fans, like we are, and like our listeners probably are too, it's like we could definitely see links to other McCartney songs or just like typical Paul, like the do you
Oh,
see
for
me? Like
sure.
absolutely. Like that's Paul to a T.
To make an even farther out McCartney reference, the way that he plays guitar, I found was really interesting here on the acoustic because he's really like heavy jamming, and you can feel like you can hear how his fingers are sliding up and down the neck.
Mhm.
And that's really cool. I was thinking back to his Martin guitar where he wrote a song about that on Egypt Station, Confidant.
Yeah.
And then it brought me back to my personal man crush, Lawrence Juber, because it reminded me a lot of the way he plays.
Oh yeah. Side note, unrelated to McCartney 3, but about Lawrence Juber, if I might.
Oh.
Um you didn't sign up for this, listeners, but you're getting it. I was watching the pretty terrible TV movie, I guess, A Very Brady Christmas
Okay.
last weekend. And I did not know that Lawrence Schubert did all the music for it.
That's right, I remember reading that in his bio. Now I have to watch that movie again, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. I guess he does a lot of the stuff for, like, he did a lot of stuff for Brady reunions and all that, but I did not know that. So yeah, Lawrence Schubert.
Nice.
But yes, definitely can hear the similarity to like a Lawrence Schubert style playing.
Who was with him during the McCartney II album?
Yes, so there we
Or right
go. There's a
right
tie-in.
before when Wings was, disbanded right before, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So let's continue on because I really want to talk about Find My Way because it's my favorite song on the album, I think.
Okay, go for it.
So, Find My Way, I mean, this is very pandemic-y. Paul talks about anxieties, people who had no worries or having worries. He told Uncut, actually, that he knew people who were close to going under with COVID. And so the anxiousness of the beginning of the pandemic was really behind this song. Paul has said for those people, for his friends that are constantly worrying, constantly anxious, he can pretty much find an optimistic exit from a bad situation, is what he said on Adam Buxton podcast. And to that I say, good for you. Because those of us, some of us, are pretty anxious and are pretty anxious during this time.
Mhm.
So, but he sort of saw this song as a way to kind of shepherd his friends and those feeling anxious through the COVID pandemic. I love this song. The first time I heard it, I was like, I don't know, the whole like, I know my left from right. I was a bit like, okay, whatever, as a lyric. But as somebody who, trivia about me, I don't know my left from my right. So I was a little bit like, okay, braggadocious. Like, you can tell your left from your right. Um,
Well, he's left-handed, he has kind of an advantage in that way.
That's true, that's true. Yeah, so but I again, love the song. I think the Mellotron is amazing, and I'm pretty sure this is the Mellotron that it was on Strawberry Fields Forever. That's the Mellotron that's in that studio, and if you listen to our Flaming Pie special, we talk about the documentary included in that where he shows off that Mellotron, and it takes you through the instruments in Hogs Mill. And I love it's like a sneaky little harpsichord sounding part. It's in the beginning and then it sort of sneaks in towards the end.
Mm.
And it just sort of it's a little bit like Ever Present Past from Memory on the
Oh,
Soul.
yeah,
Just a
mhm.
teeny tiny little part of that. And then I thought he has just like a part that's like an ooh bop bop, very Paul. It's like ooh bop bop, yeah. And then he says, oh yeah, in the middle of it. And I was
Mhm.
like, this is so like 90s. It reminded me of stuff we heard on the radio in the 90s a little bit. But it's definitely the most mainstream pop song, I think. I think this probably would have been the single,
Yeah.
if there was one. Yeah.
Yeah, and the way he situated it on the album, I think too, because he starts with this bookend thing that comes back, but then this is the first big song, and I think that this is the song that he really expects us to perk our ears up at and be like, "Oh, okay, here we go." And he really did that. I love, 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 love the way this opens with those big chords. It sort of reminds me of
Hmm.
the riffs in The Who's Tommy.
Oh.
Yeah, it was really, like, banging, I loved it. And then speaking of banging, the fucking drums are so good, and then you remember he played those too. Ugh.
I had a couple of moments like that on this album where I'm like, Jesus Christ, he's playing the drums. Like I had to remind myself. That's so funny.
Oh god, yeah. I actually listened to the song before I read the lyrics, so I didn't know that it was about anxiety and lockdown. Like, you only hear pick up a few lyrics, and yeah, I picked up that left from right and, like, this "I can help you" sort of thing, and it sounded so cheery and optimistic, like a summer song. Like a song
Oh,
that
yeah.
makes you smile and dance. Like, in the music, there's nothing too heavy here, but then when you read the lyrics, there's a juxtaposition there, which is also very Paul and just it's just a layered optimism, which I really like about it.
Yeah, I do too. I could see this one being busted out in concerts. Hopefully, we get a Paul concert in the next little while.
God,
Uh,
please.
this is very much like a "Come On to Me" kind of thing, where you can definitely see people singing along to it, dancing.
Mhm.
I don't know. I my ears perked up right away when he said overwhelmed with anxieties because I was like, "Yep, that's me right now." I get that because this year has been a lot for all of us, and it's kind of nice to know that Paul, even though he does feel like he's able to sort of compartmentalize and get over things and come at things with optimism, he recognizes what this year has been. You know, it wasn't
Yeah.
lost on Paul, which is actually like a comforting thought. I don't know why. I guess because hashtag celebrities are like the rest of us, but
Mm.
it's nice to know that Paul has been with us all along. I don't know if that makes sense, but
It
it's,
totally makes sense, and
yeah.
it's part of the reason why I fucking love him, and I will be an apologist until the day I die, because he's just got this way of pulling the light out of the dark sometimes, you know? He makes masterpieces out of personal pain, which are veiled in metaphor, and in this way, he's, suffered through the pandemic, was personally in lockdown, just like the rest of us were,
Yeah.
and thought about how he could make art out of it.
Yes. I have something to say actually that might contradict what you said, but we'll save
Okay.
that for a later track.
Oh, well, I can't wait for the argument.
It comes into play later. No,
Ooh,
but I mean, in general, I will say I agree with you in general, but yeah, I'll have some nuggets to contribute later on.
alright, I'm looking forward to that.
Sweet. Well,
Yeah.
let's move on to Pretty Boys.
This was an interesting song. At
Yeah.
first, I was like, "This is sort of it's sort of cute, it's sort of weird, it's sort of acoustic." It's definitely not one of the songs that if I was to call out 3 tracks in this album, I would say, "Whoa, that's amazing." It kind of almost feels like a campfire song,
Oh,
and yeah, but what I liked about it was that even though it kind of has that very relaxed feeling, it's about such a weird thing about the way you feel or he feels when he has to pose for photographers. And I think he said something like, when they say like make love to the camera and, I think how commoditized that feels for him. And
yeah.
it's interesting. It's something that obviously he's been dealing with for his whole life, and I've never thought about it. I've never thought about that once. I mean, I have a million pictures of the Beatles. We've seen thousands and thousands of different pictures of him, and he's got opinions about this, and it's just interesting because it's like it's a kind of an anxiety song to me, even though it
Mhm.
feels very nice and acoustic, but the lyrics, they have this undercurrent of being unsettling.
It's interesting to me because he told the New York Times about that very concept. You know, the song was inspired by being photographed and being told to perform for the lens. But the photographer in particular that he singled out was David Bailey. David Bailey took beautiful portraits of John and Paul. Brian, also in the 60s, was very, very famous, worked a lot with Gene Shrimpton. And it's just very funny to me that he goes back that far with it, where it's like, is he still thinking about David Bailey being like, make love to the camera and getting, is that what he's drawing from all those years ago? It's interesting that he chose Bailey
Yeah,
for that. Yeah,
probably really made an impact on a very young person who'd never done that before. Just
right.
starting in the very early days at least, and comparing them to bicycles for hire. I thought that was super dirty and funny, even though I don't think he meant it that way, but I liked it.
It didn't even occur. I'm so innocent. It didn't even
You
occur to
are
me like
not!
that.
Shut the fuck up.
Well, it didn't actually occur to me that way, but I do like how, yeah, so the pretty boys in the song are male models, and Paul does compare them to bicycles for hire, which I'm assuming is like a city bike situation that he's drawing on. I like this song, and I gotta say, this is one of the ones that is growing on me the more times I listen to it. I don't think the first listen through I would have gone back to it, but I think it gets more infectious and it gets more ingrained in my brain the more times I listen to it.
Yes.
It is one of those classic Paul acoustic songs. You just got to have a couple of those on an album. So I think he might be just sort of like filling the slot, but I think it's interesting. Yeah, and like you said, I think the subject matter makes it really unique and quirky.
Yeah, if it was anybody else singing it, we might not really think about it, but whenever he does something that harkens back to the past that we have all been obsessed with for so long, it just adds this interesting extra layer to the song, whether the song is memorable or not.
Totally.
Yeah.
And, if you think back to that GQ interview that he gave over the summer, he sounded extremely nostalgic. I think we talked about it at the time, I'm pretty sure,
Mm.
because he's really like, in lockdown, gotten a chance to really think back on the Beatle years and John and these little experiences that he may have forgotten about. And maybe that was one of the things where he's like, God damn it, David Bailey. Like, I felt like a piece of
Yeah.
meat, you know? I could see that happening.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I like this track. It's all right. It's sitting in third position, which I think is a good spot for it in the album.
I feel like he usually has an acoustic in 3rd position. I'd have to go back and look at that, but that just
Yeah, that
feels like
sounds
the
about
right
right.
spot for a Paul album.
Well, following Pretty Boys, we have Women and Wives. So, Women and Wives, inspired by a book Paul was reading on Leadbelly, which makes sense. And it largely delivers advice that Paul seems to be handing down to the younger generation. There are lines like, many choices to make, many chains to unravel. Every path that we take makes it harder to travel. And what we do with our lives seems to matter to others. Some of them may follow roads that we run down. Chasing tomorrow, get ready to run. He's got these sort of directions for, he said being a father, grandfather sort of inspired him to contribute lines like that. And it is a bluesy song, but it's in a waltz tempo, which is really interesting. I could definitely hear the Lead Belly influence in his
Mhm.
voice.
And
Yeah.
I like that because Leadbelly was a singer and a songwriter, like more of the folk type. And his version of Rock Island Line was the one that inspired Lonnie Donegan's recording of Rock Island Line, which
Oh.
inspired the skiffle craze. George Harrison once said that if there was no Leadbelly, there would be no Lonnie Donegan, no Beatles. Therefore, no Leadbelly, no Beatles.
Oh,
So
I
that's
love that.
another it's like another like, it gives me chills to kinda think about it, that he
Yeah.
was reading a biography of this, iconic folk singer. If you've never heard Leadbelly, like, wow, you gotta listen
Oh,
to his Rock On Line, it's incredible.
talk about a
Um,
freaking voice that will take your
oh
breath away.
god,
Yeah.
and Paul's kinda trying to channel that sorta style.
Yeah.
He sorta uses that voice that he used in the heavier bluesy voice he used in Lady Madonna, he used it in Get Me Outta Here on New. Sounds a lot like that song to me.
Yes, definitely. And I also thought that the heaviness on the piano really reminded me of Too Much Rain from Chaos and Creation,
Oh,
which,
yeah,
by the way, people have
definitely.
called Chaos and Creation McCartney III, they tongue in cheek, but I definitely got that vibe from it. And I think this is the track where his voice, it was really perfect for the arrangement, the vocals, the lyrics, everything. I think his voice sounded great on this track.
Yeah, I agree, I agree. He's learning how where his strengths lie now, and he's for the most part, and we'll get to that exception later, but for the most part, he's
Oh, will we?
right. Yes, we will. He was right he was writing to his strengths.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And yeah, it's kind of a dark song just because it sounds kind of ominous as he's singing it, but
Mhm.
it also feels luxurious in a weird way. But I loved learning about the Lead Belly influence behind this, and where he sort of was reading the bio, sat down at the piano and started with the first line, about women and wives, and the rest sort of came tumbling out to hear him tell it.
I feel like what you just said, like, ominous but luxurious, that's also kind of a way to describe what it feels like to listen to Leadbelly, like, he really did.
Yes.
That
Oh,
connection is
totally.
so good.
Ugh, all right, well, now I just need to go listen to Lead Belly the rest of the night.
Oh my god, so
So
good.
good. Shall we
Hey, let's move on
proceed?
to the next track, Lavatory Lil.
Go for it, Erica.
Okay, at first, I really did not think I was going to like this. I was not looking forward to listening to it because the name is so gross.
Yeah.
Gross. But it's one of my favorite tracks in the whole album. I love it. It's a
Oh.
to me, it feels like a new version of Hell on Wheels, kind of the way it's like a hard driving guitar and he has this echo of Paul in the background behind him, like, it really made me miss Linda because she would have sounded so good on those background vocals.
Oh, she would've. You're so right. Oh my
Yeah.
god. I could totally hear her there.
Yeah, and I just love the way the song felt so classic rock Paul. Like, sometimes Paul does, like, rocking out that doesn't feel totally authentic, but this song to me felt super authentic.
Well, I mean, first of all, the vocal was first take vocal. He didn't re-record it at all. So it was very quick and dirty, like that rock and roll style. But also, so Lavatory Lil is code name, word, whatever, for somebody who Paul told the New York Times, someone who screwed him over, basically, and he will never ever divulge who it is. But the person who it's about and he will know who it is.
I love that so much.
He like fucking went off. Like I did not expect this, but he described it as someone, quote unquote, we rubbed up against, and he quote drew on my dislike of this individual and made her into a song character. And, like, he was not ambiguous about that at all. So, I think that was something that made me enjoy the song a lot more, being like, "Okay, well, there's definitely something here under the surface."
Yeah, and it's badass, and he's not usually this upfront and kinda nasty, like, she's acting like a starlet, but she's looking like a harlot, and
Harlot,
she's
yeah.
slowly heading over the hill, Lavatory Lil like, that's nasty.
That is
That is
nasty.
plus calling somebody, Lavatory Lil, that's gross.
Yeah. I mean, do we have any guesses about who it's about?
The only person that I could think of off the top of my head was maybe Kanye,
Oh, really? Interesting.
but
Interesting.
not because of anything I know about, but just because Kanye can be really volatile, and we haven't heard anything about them collaborating again after the first time they did it.
That is really interesting. I didn't even think about that.
Did you have a
Um,
person in mind?
well, I mean, I went for the obvious. What I thought was the obvious was Heather Mills. The only thing to throw me off of that is that Paul sort of like put this person in a work context. But then
Mm,
I looked into the lyrics, and we've got lyrics like, "You think she's being friendly, but she's looking for a Bentley, and she robbed a golden swan with a pill." And it's sort of like that sounds like a gold digger, which could be Kanye. Let's be fair, because the song, that made me sort of think like, okay, well, regardless of whether Heather Mills was that or not, whatever your opinion of her might be, that was her perception in the media. So I thought that was maybe an allusion to her. I'm not sure.
it's quite possible, and he'll never tell.
He'll never tell. That bastard, Paul. You could tell us, Paul. We won't tell.
Yeah, I text you sometimes. Sometimes you text me back. If you wanna slip in between those, like, marketing texts who this is about, I
Yeah.
promise I won't say anything.
Yeah, I mean, the next time you text us about a colored vinyl, if you just like want to tell us, that'd be totally okay.
I'm still angry I didn't get that text.
I'm sorry. It was just I think it was about the violet vinyl, so
Exactly, I wanted it.
the one vinyl variant you didn't get a text about.
The one color that I really, really wanted.
Damn it. Well,
And one more apologist thing I have to mention about this song.
yes.
His voice to me was great, and not like, "This was really good for Paul." Like, I thought it was really good.
It didn't stick out to me, so I must not have like really picked up on the fact that it was good or bad. I will take your word for it, and I'll have to go back and listen to it again.
Yeah, I know there are some people who are just like, "His voice is just shite this time," but
Oh, they fucking say that about everybody, and I'm tired of it. Like, just it
yeah,
is what it is, and we should be fucking grateful. So, and he still is making great music and sounding good on,
I do.
he's working his voice well. I can't even. I could pop off, but I'm going
Oh,
to
you
tap into
should,
my
you
inner
can.
peace. Well, maybe some other time.
Okay.
But
McCartney
yeah.
III has made you feel more optimistic about life, I see.
Oh, yes, it's totally I just feel amazing about 2020. I feel amazing that it's almost over. That's great. This came out the perfect time, just like the death rattle of 2020.
Exactly.
Thank
Maybe
you,
Lavatory
Paul.
Lil is just 2020.
Oh my god, okay, yeah, that's headcanon now. But yeah, that name is disgusting. Like, I mean, all of this is like that's pretty bad. Like, there's a lot of these lyrics where it's just they're bad. It's like you said, it's just nasty. It's like it's not even mean, it's nasty.
Yeah, at first it's like, "Oh, that sounds like Polythene Pam," but no, he's talking about toilets. Ugh.
I think that's what you said. Remember when we did a couple episodes ago, we were talking about Lavatory Lil, and you were like, "Oh yeah, like Polythene Pam or Rocky Raccoon,"
Yeah.
which is interesting. I thought maybe when I was reading things he said about the song, he would allude to that. Nope, not at all.
No, it's just the way his mind works with words with a very different message.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I thought it was a light bouncy song I wrote. But yeah, I definitely get that rock edge, that rock and roll sort of run double runny kind of thing.
Mm, mhm.
But yeah, I wrote totally vindictive because it is. Basically, it's Paul being bitchy, and we love to see it.
We're super here for that because, I mean, we still use that picture of him flashing the double middle finger as, like, our visual anthem for life,
Yes.
so,
That's
yeah.
been like the go-to text image for us when we bitch to each other about stuff for what, 2 years now? Ever since that
Yeah.
came out.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's pretty much the best, and we'll probably post on our Instagram before this year's over because
Oh,
once
oh,
again,
yeah. I think that's the way we need to say goodbye to 2020.
fuck yeah. Alright, it's happening. Okay, so we leave Lavatory Lil and we move on to Deep Deep Feelin'.
That's what she said.
Um, there's a lot of that on this album. That's what he said. So Paul told Uncut, this is the crazy, quote unquote, craziest song on the album. It's so crazy. He's like, you don't know where it's gonna go. It twists and turns, and it's over 8 minutes. This track was started in 2019. It is a uncut. According to Uncut, it's a continuation of the liberation of those McCartney records. So if you think back to McCartney, he's liberated from the Beatles. McCartney II, he's very experimental, and those experimental things that he started in the 60s with the Beatles records. Paul has said the song was inspired by the tingling all over feeling when you love someone so much it hurts. Sorry, I
Oh
just
my
had
god.
to get kind of mocking with that.
I
Um,
love him. I love him. Aggressively. I aggressively love that.
aggressively love it. Oh my god, I love it. And Paul has said that it may come off as a bit indulgent, but he said making an album is also about having fun, so he didn't bother to cut it down. And to be honest, I felt like he couldn't have cut it down. I don't think there is a 3 minute pop song in there. I think it had to be the 8 minutes because it sort of meanders for 8 minutes. This is one that I felt was the most McCartney of the tracks, and what I mean by that is it sort of fits into the trilogy very well. I gotta say, I probably won't go back to this one regularly. I don't think this is gonna make it onto my playlist, but I do like my favorite part's the last minute of the song where it sort of transforms into like a guitar ballad and it repeats its main message verse sort of thing over and over. And I also put down that it feels kind of like a painting to me. I don't
Mm.
know how to like translate that other than it's just sort of like an emotion dump. Like he says emotion 1,000 million times.
Mhm.
So, but it just sort of felt like, because Paul also paints, and I just sort of felt like it was a sort of an improvised sort of song painting.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of
Yeah,
putting
yeah.
it.
I don't know, but
No, I love that.
but it's not one of my favorites on the album. I don't think.
Maybe it's kind of like abstract art in a way. It's hard to have a
Yeah,
favorite, but it's interesting and it's something that draws you in with all of the different things that you can see in it. And in this case, hear in it. I mean, there's like an R&B feeling in the beginning. There's these regular, irregular rhythms. It goes one place and then another. And then it really mellows out at the end. It's almost like trance music before it gets into that acoustic final ending.
yeah,
Like
and there's
it's just everywhere.
yeah, and also around the 2:30 mark, there's sort of a ballady piano bit that again is a very Paul thing. So it's sort of like everything in the kitchen sink in this song, where I think Paul just again he called it indulgent. I think it is, but
Mhm.
I think it's in a way that Paul always indulges himself. I think he just sort of this time didn't bother to stop himself. And that's okay. It's Paul's album. I think he's right in saying he was having fun. And yeah, I think it fits in perfectly with the album, the trilogy, and yeah, it makes sense. It's just not my bag, baby.
Mhm. It is probably the longest song Paul has put out in a really long time. I can't think
Mm,
of a song that's longer.
no, probably some of the closers, but I don't. Yeah, have to go back and
Maybe.
think about it.
No, I don't know.
Um,
It's interesting, but I agree with you. It's not one for the best of playlist in my book.
yeah, I could see people loving this, maybe sampling it. I think some of the more esoteric listeners among us will really dig it, but I am not even hiding the fact that I'm way more pop inclined. So of course, this isn't really my cup of tea.
That's fine. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So let's move on.
Let's move on to the song that's in New York, right? The New York
Mm.
mural is sliding.
Yep.
Oh, oh, okay. Would you like to say something? Is this where we start getting aggressive here?
But I will. I don't want to say anything about this song because it's my least favorite track in the album. I don't
Oh,
like it.
wow.
It's
Jesus.
feels one-dimensional to me, and it feels like there's this class of middle of the album Paul cuts that all sound vaguely like this that he's put out over the last 50 or so years.
Mm,
It's definitely my least favorite on this album. It just feels like so many other songs whose names I can't even remember because they all kind of sound like this.
yeah, I get that. I get that. I Well, it's interesting. This song is the only one on the album that has is crediting other contributions from people like Rusty Anderson on guitar, Abel Boreal Jr. on drums, who obviously also tour with Paul and have played on other Paul albums. Greg Kurstin's also credited on this, which you guys might remember. He produced a lot of Egypt Station. So that made me kind of wonder, is this a leftover maybe from Egypt Station? Maybe Paul had this track laying around and sort of finished it for this album.
Seems like it would be given when he recorded and the fact that, unless he did something virtual with them, he's not
Right.
gonna be in a recording studio with these guys.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's my guess. It might not be true. I can't really find much where Paul's talking about this track, Erica. So maybe he also is like whatever about it. I thought the opening guitar bit was almost exactly like my favorite track, one of my favorite tracks from Memory Almost Full, which is Only Mama Knows. After the string intro, and then it goes into like that slam of guitar.
Mhm.
Remind me of that. I also thought it was kind of like when Paul thought he was in Nirvana. Like that
Sirvana.
that really weird Sirvana, yeah, like that really weird period that we all lived through. I did think it was a little bit like the fireman, though. It had a line in it that is very much that Paul stream of consciousness. You know, we talked about it in our Flaming Pie episode, where these lines sort of pop into Paul's head, like "I go back so far, I'm in front of me," where people are like, "Oh my god, what did that mean?" And Paul's like, "I don't know, I just thought of it." And in Sliden, he says, "I can see my body through the windows in my hair." It's like, "What?"
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like that line, that's really interesting, and I didn't notice it because I just didn't like the song very much. Maybe I'll go back and listen to it with new appreciation, thank you.
I actually didn't even notice it either until I looked at the mural closer, the one in New York, so maybe if you visit it, then you'll have a transcendental experience.
I have to find it still, I haven't found it.
Yeah, I can't figure out where it is either. If you know where the New York mural is, tweet us or something and let us know, because it doesn't have any identifying marks around it.
Yeah, I've gotta bring this up to our folks because they know Louis as well, but when I was on Twitter searching McCartney
Oh,
III
yeah.
mural NYC, the first thing that came up was our friend Louis Pearlman, who was on our Pride episode in June, mouthing off to the GOP about how they can basically go fuck themselves, and he mentioned NYC and McCartney III in it, and I was like, "This is the best!"
I
And
know.
I kinda stopped looking for the mural and just was, like, laughing over that.
Peak Louis. That was
Yeah.
great. He was so pissed off that McCartney 3 was coming out a week late, and blaming the GOP, which go for it, Louis. Fight the good
Why
fight.
not?
Might as well.
Viva la resistance.
Exactly, and that's the perfect way to do it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So, okay, so not one of your favorites. I'm okay. I'm, like, lukewarm on it. I
Mhm.
don't know if this is gonna go on a playlist either. I would say there are 3 to 4 tracks on this album that would go on a playlist for me as a best of, but that's not one of them.
I agree, as I mentioned,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes. Yes, yes. So let's get out of sliding territory and go to
Yes.
The Kiss of Venus.
Okay. I loved this one. This is the one place where I really feel like having the 12 Days of Paul is a huge benefit to him because when you listen to the song, you listen through it a couple of times, it's it's a perfect Paul song. The lyrics are great, the melody is great, and if Paul had recorded this 30 years ago, it would have been
Mm,
one of the top classics of his career. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite sit right in his voice as it sounds now, and I feel like I'm doing a good amount of, I don't know, just laying over my imagination over what I know it would have sounded like at one time, and I think, like, it almost makes me a little sad because it's the one place where it really stands out to me that
mhm.
I just wish that Paul McCartney in 1972 had recorded this. But I love the song.
I also love this song. I think it is sublimely beautiful. I love the guitar work, the melody, sort of that trilogy of notes that, hits a sharp and comes back down. It reminds me of almost like a carnival aspect, like a calliope kind of thing, which would be stretching,
Mhm.
but it has that sort of vibe to it. I think that one of my favorite parts is the harpsichord at the end, how he slips that in there. It kind of veers into Baroque pop territory. This is the simplicity of Paul that we love. This is like Paul when he gets into a studio, and we'll see more of that at the album's closer, but it's sort of like A Great Day. It's like A Calico Skies. It's like any of those lovely little ballads that we get chucked in there on the Paul
Mhm.
albums. But I love it. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. This is a track that Paul sort of stumbled upon while he's noodling on his guitar, as he says. He recorded it to his iPhone, and if you get the Japanese version of McCartney III, the iPhone demo is actually included as a bonus track. So look for that. Hopefully, it'll leak out over the internet. And he said that, sometimes he records like little snippets or parts of songs and kind of forgets about them or walks away and is like, I'll do it later. But this is one he forced himself to finish. He was like, what else am I going to do? Watch TV? I'm just going to finish the song. And of all places to talk about this song, he referenced it in the Flaming Pie archives box. So in the reissue that just came out. As an example, I think he talks about some other songs that ended up on Flaming Pie, because a lot of those started as fragments that he sort of had on the shelf as well. And The Kiss of Venus, I love the name. I think it's just, it conjures up images that are, mystical, and like the statue and all the stuff. And the song was inspired about, it's about astrology, it's about synchronicity of the universe. He said that a book he was given by Jules Holland's wife about that very thing really inspired this track, which I think just makes it cooler. It's a great track. I love it. This would make it on my best of Paul playlist.
Absolutely. And it also kind of calls back to Venus and Mars, which I like too.
I was just thinking, as you were talking before, I could see this on like a Middle Wings album,
Mhm.
or like
Yeah.
maybe an early, like a Wildlife or something.
It would have been a great Ram track too, like, and
Oh, yes.
it's just a great song, it fits in anywhere in his catalog. I do have that one thing about it that I feel is a shame, but it doesn't make me love this song less. I love this song.
Yes, yeah. I didn't register his voice that much on it. I think just because I'm sort of, it is what it is about his voice. But yeah, just the song itself, it shines so brightly that it can't be diminished by Paul's voice. It's wonderful. The Kiss of Venus, A plus plus.
Yes.
Well, gee, Carpe Diem.
Okay, I guess we're gonna seize the day. Wanna seize the day? Paul likes
um,
to seize the day.
yeah, Paul loves to seize the day. He says about seize the day, that's me, it's the truth, read the sentiment. That's what he told Loud and Quiet magazine. He told BBC Radio 6 it was a reminder to grab the good stuff to get through the pandemic. We see more allusions to the pandemic, which, again, makes it more relatable, hashtag relatable content. So, Seize the Day, as you might tell from the title, is kind of, it has a lot of philosophical moments in it. But Paul says that he basically followed a trail of breadcrumbs through the song. So he did it in the style of a lot of other songs that he has sort of sat down and kind of just followed them wherever they would take him. And I wrote I wrote down more of Paul's brain vomit question mark. He so this, and I'm gonna ask for your, you know what, let me know what you think, because I have a whole thing about this.
Again, it's one of these songs, and we talked about it before, where this is what I love about Paul. When everybody else is talking about how much this year sucks and how much lockdown is just awful, he's finding the bright side of it all. He's following his brilliant and somewhat mad brain wherever it goes and making a song that is just like, it's just perfect, vintage, optimistic Paul. One of the lyrics that I loved, like, "When the cold days come, when the old ways fade away, there'll be no more sun, and we'll wish that we had held on to the day." Like, that's just so it feels like it's not just one-dimensional toxic positivity. It's not that. It's multi-layered, and it's real, and for all of those folks that say that compared to John Lennon, Paul McCartney is not authentic, well, no, no. He's authentic, and this is the way it comes out. It's not quite as straightforward as John was, but when it comes out, it's brilliant.
That's a great way to put that, I've got to say. But I'm glad you touched on this optimism and all of that, because here's the thing I was getting at earlier. So, in an interview, and I'm sorry, I don't know, I can't remember which one this is, but the interviewer was sort of like, "Oh, it's so philosophical. Did you set out to write a philosophical song? It has so many kernels of wisdom." And Paul's like, "Dude, I don't even know. I just wrote a song. Like, I started on the path. It took me down this way. I wrote Seize a Day. And I think it's interesting how, and I do this too, we all do it. We look to Paul to sort of write these songs that have deeper meaning to them, and a lot of them do. His catalog is so rich, but it's like sometimes Paul is just a dude who wrote a song, which I think he's telling us this is kind of what that is. But that having been said, even if it is a stream of consciousness song, it's still, like you said, Erica, it sort of like belies that optimism, which he himself recognizes earlier in the album with By My Way. He talks about it. So even if he is sort of letting this random voice in his head or muse or whatever it is kind of guide this song, I think that's when the truest parts of yourself tend to come out. It's like when you're
Yeah.
drunk, right? It's like you go to the truest part of yourself and whatever comes out comes out. So I think that is kind of what Paul's doing. And so these songs, more than anything else, sort of showcase who Paul is deep down. So I think that is authentic. It does feel true, even if it is kind of like cheap. I don't know. Maybe that's controversial, but it sometimes feels cheap the way it comes out, but I don't think that makes it less authentic.
I don't think he's doing it as a pandering thing, even though he has had the reputation over the years of kind of being a panderer. But I really think that that's kind of his style of no filter authenticity. And it's a little messy and it's a little weird sometimes, but it's inspiring to me. I mean, most people have a filter that would stop them from going down a road like this, being like, that's ridiculous, or that, they judge it. I kind of feel like, even though sometimes it's not always brilliant work, like he just goes down those paths and sees where they go. And that's a really admirable quality to me.
That's true. And, also Seize the Day, I think, is something that reflects on where Paul is in his life. He's older, he's 78. I think that kind of sentiment comes with wisdom of time. So it
Hmm.
makes sense that he would kind of adopt that saying or that ideal. So I mean, it all makes sense. It just it is interesting to me though that automatically we see it as this sort of like philosophical message to like younger people or whatever, and it's just a song. He's like, it's just a song that I wrote. And yes, he's Paul McCartney, but it's like, he's not the Messiah, guys.
I'm not saying he's the Messiah. I'm saying that I appreciate the fact that he is just authentic about these kind of things. And if he is somebody who is an optimistic person, and like he says in the article about this, it's a quote that you have, that's me, it's the truth. Okay, that's cool. A lot of people wouldn't be able to be in the world like that. And
Yeah,
because most of the world is, we get likes and retweets when we're more cynical and when we're, snarky. Sometimes something like this, the title sees the day as cliche and kind of silly, but the fact that somebody's willing to put himself out there and say, this is me, maybe it's kind of corny, maybe it's kind of cheesy, but screw you. This is me.
but that's kind of Paul. He is kind of corny, kind of
Yeah.
cheesy, and that's part of why we love him because he's, that's just who he is.
Made in Rockdown is 100% sincere.
That's true. Okay, yeah. Compare that with Seize a Day, and it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So that being said, the song itself, I thought, and I'm going to say this, I thought it was kind of Ringo-ish.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Er,
wow.
I
In what way?
Well, I think knowing me, you could probably tell what I mean by that. So, and
Yeah,
interestingly, as we're recording this, Ringo just released a new song. I don't know if you know that.
I did
Um,
not.
yep, I'll send you the link. He released a new song, which is ironic because when I listened to this song the first and second time, just some of the lyrics, I could hear Ringo singing them because they're kind of simplistic. It's kind of that Ringo peace and love kind of bullshit. I don't know. It's maybe just the cadence or the delivery or just the style of the song. It was kind of Ringo-ish, which I don't know that Ringo's material is on the same level necessarily as Paul's. Always. Was that delicate?
I don't think that anybody would, even the biggest Ringo fan, is not going to say that Ringo is a songwriter on par with Paul McCartney. But I see what you mean. I mean, I can see like "Seize the Day" could be. I can hear that phrase in his voice. Yeah, I know what you
Yeah.
mean.
Just some of the verses I thought too were, Ringo loves like the monosyllabic delivery of the lines, like very like, and just the way Paul sort of sang it or the way the lines are phrased, it just seemed very Ringo-ish. I could hear this on a Ringo album, absolutely.
I'm gonna have to listen to it again with that in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, but I also, at the same time, I thought it was catchy as hell and, one of the more popish tracks on the album. So what does that mean? I don't know. But I guess Ringo stuff is also kind of that way. So it's very accessible, I think is a good word for how I feel. Okay, so let's see, we're nearing the end here, guys. I can't believe
I
it.
know.
Well, next up, Deep Down.
That's what she said.
So much that's what she said.
It's
And
so dirty! Sorry.
please, Erica, take us away.
That's it. That's all. It's a dirty song. The lyrics are dirty, and that's all I'm gonna say about it.
You sound like a Bible Belt mother or something.
I find it ridiculous when he goes down this path, like the "Come On to Me" sort of songs. I don't find this authentic at all.
Fuck you.
No, actually, I love "For You,"
Fuck
but
you's great, but I mean that the dirty tongue in cheekness is like the best thing about fuck you.
yeah, but "Come On to Me" I didn't really love because I felt like it was Paul, like, posing as, like, some sexy dick swinging pickup artist, whatever, but, like, I feel like this has the same kind of like, he's trying to fit into this role. Like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Like, "Look around, it's party time tonight." Yeah, like, I don't go there with him.
Yeah, the thing he's selling, it's like, yeah, the bad side of town, like, it's Paul, come on. Like, you don't go to the bad side of town.
No, this is like his impression of what it means to be a bad boy. Like, this isn't him. It's funny, and the song itself gets, like, more interesting as it goes on musically, but, it's longer than it needs to be. It's almost 6 minutes. It's not one of the strongest tracks, and it's really, like, hilariously dirty.
I'm crying, like, that is so funny. Oh. Yeah, I agree. I It's not one that I am gonna reach for. It's not going on my playlist. It definitely sounds improvised, which I wouldn't be surprised if it was largely improvised on the spot.
Mm.
And I'm not a big fan of jam bands or improvisation or jazz or any of that kind of thing. So I like structure in my music, so it's not really my bag, but it's got a good groove. I'll give it that. I'll have to go back and look at the lyrics though to assess how naughty he's being.
Wanna get you up, wanna get you up, gonna take a bite, gotta let me know, we can throw a party every night.
Well, maybe he's talking about, like, a birthday party with cake.
Gotta get deep down, wanna do it right, wanna get deep down, look around this end of town tonight.
So he's going to the seedy end of town because they have the best cake shop for this birthday
Yeah,
party.
but then we get to, "I wanna pick you up, gonna get a bike, gonna let me know, we can throw a party every night." Now I'm thinking he's like a 16-year-old on a bike.
Who wants to go get cake? I don't know why I'm making this
Yeah.
funny. Yeah, I mean,
I don't know, it's just I don't gel with it, I think it's funny though. But the
yeah,
song itself is interesting to listen to, and it's got some good musical sections.
yeah, yeah. I definitely agree with the lyrics evolve more interestingly as the song goes along, but yeah, I could definitely see him sort of just like spitting this out. I'm sure the demo sounds pretty similar to this. Okay, great. Deep down.
So
And it
gross.
reminds me of the Spice Girls. Get down, get deeper and down. Saturday night.
Oh, totally.
I mean, it doesn't sound anything like it, but just the title. God. So oh my God, last
Wow, we're already at the end.
we came full circle and we actually did come full circle because Winterbird, so the last track, Winterbird slash When Winter Comes, Winterbird opens and recalls the same guitar lick from the album's opener. That very cool acoustic dissonant arpeggio that we were talking about earlier.
And you know what it reminds me of now that I'm thinking about it? It sounds like the opening of Bluebird. It's got
Hmm.
that same kinda, like, high, sorta twangy acoustic feel.
Yeah. Oh my God, totally. I can hear it now that you say that. I didn't think about it before, but yeah. I think Paul sometimes has his favorite spots on the guitar, and that's sort of where he
Mm.
like start things. And maybe sometimes he scraps that and goes somewhere else for songs, but sometimes he just stays there. Maybe this was the case, yeah.
In this case, he scrapped it and traveled back in time 28 years
Oh,
to a
yeah.
song that was done during the Flaming Pie era.
Ugh, I love that. Swing Pie,
Uh-huh.
favorite album. I was so excited when I read that. When Winter Comes, beautiful, in my opinion. It's an old track, and you can tell by Paul's voice that
Mhm.
was done a long time ago. But it was actually recorded on the same day as Great Day and Calico Skies from Flaming Pie. And he said he nearly released this on the Flaming Pie reissue, but he didn't want it to get buried. So he recognized that it was a good enough track, should stand on its own. And so we got it properly on McCartney III. And interestingly, this track was the one who kind of sparked the whole project. This song combined with Winterbird, Long-tailed Winterbird, were supposed to comprise this animation that he was going to do with a friend. And so he dug it out, and hearing it again and sort of wanting to put it with this new instrumental music kind of set him on the path of making a new album. So thank you, When Winter Comes. And also interesting is this track was sort of co-produced by George Martin. Paul is very adamant, saying it's just me on guitar. I'm just recording it, just laying it down. Basically, he wants the credit, but it was a George Martin session, so he gives him half the credit.
I like that callback.
It's always lovely to see George show up, even posthumously, on a Paul album.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, that he made a thing about that and mentioned, "Well, I did all of this myself," but then he has another track where he's got his band members on it, and we don't really know, and he's got, an actual producer, so that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
It's also strange that he hasn't really addressed that, although I've seen the credits in the CD that come with the CD version, and he does say that Rusty, Abe, Greg Kurstin, among others, are on this album in some capacity, but he doesn't denote exactly what they did. We can assume, that Rusty is playing guitar and Rabe's playing drums.
Mhm.
My whole thing with, sliding with Greg Kurstin is that was just how I came to the conclusion it was maybe left over from each station. But hopefully, somebody will ask him about it and we'll get answers.
Yeah,
It's interesting, but it's nice that George shows up.
for sure, but that question is my first question to him when he comes on this podcast.
Yes, looking forward to that, Paul. Can't wait. Paul has sort of said this in interviews too. We alluded to it earlier, but the lyrics really reflect the McCartney time period, the first album in the trilogy. The simplicity of life on the farm, going up to Scotland to, and escaping to Sussex to escape the breakup of the Beatles and this horrible, horrible time in his life. And he sort of related that to the COVID pandemic now, where people just sort of want the simple things and they want to have those back. And, it's like missing just being outside or like tending the garden or, he talks about just farm related things like plowing an acre, that sort of stuff, which is, I think it's very special, that it sort of applies to the very beginning of the McCartney trilogy. And it also applies to now.
Yeah, and it applies to Flaming Pie, which is
Ugh,
another very special Paul McCartney album, kind of made there are a couple of very poignant McCartney albums, and I feel like Flaming Pie is one of them. I feel like McCartney is one of them.
mm,
And if he's, doing something on this album, which was recorded during the Flaming Pie sessions and harkens back to who Paul was during the McCartney sessions, this is a really nice way to come full circle, not only on the album because it bookends the album with Winterbird, but to bookend the, let's say, the McCartney at home trilogy.
Totally. And he has said, when he recorded When Winter Comes in the Flaming Pie era, it was directly related to the McCartney experience of recording that. So it truly does tie in a very amazing way. It's such a great way to end the album. It leaves it on a high note. Surprised there's not a hidden track. Paul, come on. You let me down with the hidden tracks here. We know you love to end your albums with them.
We don't know exactly what is on all of those 32 different color discs. Maybe there's a different hidden track on every color, which is why you gotta catch them all.
Oh, damn. Well,
Yeah,
I guess we'll find out.
I guess so.
They start shipping and people start exploring them. Let that groove run out, people. You never know what's hiding in there.
Well, so we are through this. We
Wow.
listened to all of it. We gave our thoughts on all of the tracks, and what do you think of this album as a whole?
I think it is a solid effort. It is what we could have expected to come out of, Paul at this period in his life. I think it is what Paul needed to make, most importantly. I like it. I think it is one of those that might grow on me. The tracks that I like, the tracks I don't like, I probably won't listen to. I'll just be honest. But like The Kiss of Venus and Find My Way, even Pretty Boys, I would toss those onto a playlist and probably love them more as time goes on. I don't think it'll be one of my favorites or my keystone albums that I would point people to in Paul's catalog, but I'm not mad about it. I mean, Jesus Christ, we got a new Paul album. Like, I'm happy with that. Whatever it could be him like reading a phone book. I don't care. Like, it's great. What about you?
I really like again, I really like the way it comes full circle. I really like the way it has a message that directly connects with what we're all going through with this pandemic. He just produced art out of a really shitty time. I really like it. I like the fact that he harkened back to his first solo album. I do think that it's a bit uneven. Like he said himself, a few of the songs are a little bit indulgent, but I think there are some gems on this thing. And Kiss of Venus for sure. I love Lavatory Lil. I don't know if that might be an unpopular opinion, but yeah, I love it. I love Find My Way. I like Pretty Boys a good amount. I really do.
Yeah,
And I like Seize the Day. I like that optimism from Paul. That's a really important part of who he is to me and why I think he's inspiring. I think partly because that's not me, and I don't ever organically find the optimism in things like ever. And to see an example of somebody who does and then puts it into art is really inspiring, regardless of whether I love the song as a standalone unit. So I think that for that reason, the album is great.
yeah,
Again, like you said, there are some songs that I will probably never think about putting on a playlist, but then again, there are some songs on Band on the Run or Ram that I wouldn't think about that either.
true.
I really hope that the marketing that he's doing and this 12 Days of Paul, and I can only hope a tour on this album after we all get the vaccine will inspire some of these songs to really rise up to the level of a McCartney classic because they deserve to be.
I agree. I think also looking at the album as a whole, I think whether you love McCartney more or McCartney 2, very divisive. Especially McCartney 2, you love it or you hate it, one or the
Mm.
other. I think there's something for both camps to love about this album. He sort of gave you both.
What he didn't do is any callbacks to McCartney too. He didn't do any experimental electronic tracks.
That is true. A lot of the instrumentation on Deep Deep Feeling is electronic drums. I think there's some synth on there, but definitely not as blatant as it was in McCartney 2, for sure. But I think maybe people who love that album will love Deep Deep Feeling, and people who love that album will love like Deep Down, like the deep songs, weirdly.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I think people who love McCartney will love the Kiss of Venus. They'll love Pretty Boys. So there is something for both types of McCartney lovers.
yeah. I'm just gonna go off on it one more time.
Let's do it.
If you don't like his current vocals, just pass this album by.
Ugh,
We have a gift in that Paul McCartney made us another album, and there are gifts and imperfections, and it's
yeah,
fine. And he's 78, and what a fantastic thing for him to be still giving us music and still letting us into that crazy mind of his. And, you can just scroll on by. That's all I'm saying. Scroll on by. You don't have to complain.
yeah.
Don't yuck our yum. Just go by.
What'd you say? Don't yuck our yum?
Yeah, don't yuck our yum.
I've never heard that before.
Really?
No,
I love that phrase.
that's hilarious. No, I mean, yeah, please, like, think before you run scampering over to the Steve Hoffman forums and fucking, like, spew your shit. Like, come on. Like, don't. The one thing we should learn, and the one thing I think that Paul would like us to garner from this album is let people like things. Just fucking like, yes, this is a gift. And I liked how you said it's a gift in the imperfection. Just fucking take it and let it brighten up your 2020. For God's sake, just let us have something nice in this year.
Take it deep down.
Take a deep down breath and really look at yourself in the mirror. Anyway,
Yeah, feel that deep, deep feeling.
yes, yes. Seize day.
Yay.
God kill me. Um, yes. Anyway, but yes, I take Paul for what he is. I think we're all very, very lucky that he's still creating. And also, Jesus Christ, he was more productive than me during the pandemic. That's for sure.
Yeah, seriously.
For real. So hats off to you, Paul, for that.
And even if you don't like every song, there's something about a new Paul McCartney album, looking at it with the lens of knowing his entire body of work.
Yeah.
And there's so many connections that you can make and so many interesting things to call back to. It's just a fun mental exercise to listen to a new McCartney album.
Yeah. Agree. So, what's your favorite track?
I don't know. I'm really between Lavatory Lil and Kiss of Venus, which are like at the two opposites ends
Yeah.
of this album. I'm gonna have to keep it a tie. I just love those 2 songs.
Wow. Yeah, they are
How about
very
you?
different. Oh, I still think Find My Way is my favorite.
That's a
Um,
great one too.
yeah, it's just so it's so that classic McCartney single sound. And again, I am blatantly pop. I'm a pop lover. I love 60s pop. So it kind of touches back on that for me. But yeah, I love the Kiss of Venus. There are some real shining moments on this record, but I think Find My Way is my fave.
Also great.
Yes.
Yeah, there's at least 4 songs out of this album that I would put on a playlist, which I think is actually pretty good for almost any album.
Oh, definitely. That's potentially 4 singles, if we were A&Ring this
Mhm.
album. So that's not bad. That's really not bad. Still out of the trilogy, I think McCartney 1 is my favorite. I'm not a McCartney 2 lover. I love Temporary Secretary and Coming Up. That's pretty much it. So I would rank it 1, 3, and 2 for me.
Same,
Yeah.
same. 1 is one of my favorite McCartney albums of all time.
Yeah.
I love 1, as
Yeah.
raw and unfinished and weird as it is.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece. I mean, it's one of the canon Paul albums for sure. Well, I wanted to give a quick shout out because I pulled a lot of the quotes and the interview things from the Paul McCartney project. Check out the website. It is fucking amazing. Like, whoever runs it, and they don't do it for money or anything, they don't even have ads on the site. It archives every single Paul song, performance, anything that he's ever done, interviews, and they did such a great job with aggregating together all the interviews that Paul gave about this album and about the different tracks. So thank you guys over at the Paul McCartney Project. You are awesome.
Yeah, if you wanna go down a rabbit hole about Paul McCartney, which I
I'm
do
there.
every
Yes,
day, go here. This is amazing, this is incredible. We're gonna have to share and link to this site because if
yes.
you haven't been here, you'll probably never leave once you start.
I still have it open in a tab in my browser because I'm like, well, yep, I'm going to be holiday breaks coming up. I know what I'm going to do for a couple of days at least for the site a little bit more.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, any final thoughts on McCartney 3, my friend?
I'm so excited about it. I'm so happy there's a new Paul album, and I can't wait to see everybody's colored vinyl.
Yes, please, please post your colored vinyl, tag us in it, or anything. We just want to see who has what. If you're collecting all of them, God bless you. If you've got that rare, rare Third Man Records version, ugh, so jealous. But yes, happy McCartney 3 release day. This is such a hashtag blessed day for all of us, and
Seriously, let's seize this day.
let's seize this goddamn day. How about that?
By the deep, deep balls.
God, on that note, I just dropped my microphone. Christ. Oh my God. All right. Well, on that note, thank you, as always, for listening to Because the Beatles. And please, I mean, after that, if you'd like to subscribe on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening right now, or give us hopefully a good rating on your respective podcast listening platform, that would be great. That way other Beatlemaniacs can find us.
Yes, and please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll be posting photos and more from this episode and beyond. And remember, you can always email us your thoughts about McCartney 3 at any of those social platforms or send us an email at bcthebeatles@gmail.com. See you next time.
Bye. Go listen to McCartney 3
Now.
now.